Hey guys, it's Luna from 13 Lunar Magic, and today we're going to talk about balance in witchcraft. Balance. All right. Summing this up in 15 minutes is quite a challenge, but let's try. Now, when it comes to balance, there's usually two definitions that we think about. There's the textbook definition of balance, which is simply everything's even, equal. And then there's the spiritual definition of balance. Now, the spiritual definition of balance takes into consideration that things in the universe and nature are not exactly equal. Therefore, it's usually defined as two polar opposites complementing and interconnecting in the natural world. What does that mean? Okay, so let's talk about polar opposites. In witchcraft, we usually think of God and goddess, male and female energies. You also would consider it as where there is light, there is dark. Where there's creation, there is destruction. Those are polar opposites. And in the universe and in nature, they complement each other. They interact with each other. In other words, you can't have one without the other. You can't have one without the other. Love and marriage, love it. You know what? Some of you are probably just too young to even know what that show is. We're gonna move on. Okay. I know, besides that silly part, let's focus. Okay, let's focus. Because we only have 15 minutes to do this video, so let's go back to it. Let's talk about some other examples in our spirituality that we will come across this word balance. One of the ways that we come across it is people will say that you should be balanced with nature, the elements, and so on. When they're saying that, usually what they're saying is that you should be interconnected with Mother Nature and the elements, meaning you should be a part of them. You should go with the flow with them. Be one with them, if you will. Okay? That's kind of like its topic in its own. I still am debating whether I'm going to really talk about that, because I think as we go along with categories of how balance fits into those categories, I think it will become self-explanatory once we dive into it and I get to show you exactly how it works, okay? But there is another thing that we hear a lot. Mother Nature is balanced. The universe is balanced. Though I understand what people mean on a spiritual level when they say the universe is balanced, I can't help but have the little hobby scientist in me going, but that's not true. Let me explain. The universe is made up of matter, okay? So given our definition about the spiritual aspect of balance, what would be the polar opposite of matter? Antimatter. Well, even though scientists can recreate antimatter in a lab, it doesn't really exist in the universe. In other words, they can't find it. And for good reasons. I mean, when antimatter and matter meet, they produce gamma rays. And, well, things just wouldn't be the way they are if we had nothing but gamma rays going everywhere. If you want to know further about that, just Google it. I bring this up for good reasons. One, I think it's important, in my opinion, that we remember that even though spirituality is beautiful and it's great to have, we shouldn't also ignore science. Because science is trying to understand how the universe works, right? Spirituality is just like a leap of faith, in my opinion. But I think that we really shouldn't ignore certain things that science can prove just because it doesn't fit our spirituality. In other words, we can't evolve unless we think a little bit beyond what we have been told most of our lives. There's also another reason that I brought that up. And this is kind of where I differ with a lot of people in witchcraft. I tend to try to keep things as simple as possible. I'm a very deep thinker, okay? And one of the things I find that works for me is trying to make sense of witchcraft. Now that sounds a little bit silly, because anytime anybody hears that you're a witch and that you practice witchcraft, right off the bat they think of like some old hag and, you know, something that Hollywood made up. But, you know, look, they don't understand that witchcraft and being a witch, it's a spirituality. And depending on what type of witchcraft you practice, it's a religion. And it's not based off of Hollywood, okay, and the way Hollywood perceives us, or the stories and so on and so forth. So I get that, I do. But that's even more of a reason why I constantly try to make witchcraft make sense in the most simplest way that people can observe with their own eyes in some cases. With that being said, I want to change the definition of balance on the spiritual level. It's true, there are polar opposites in the universe. However, what we just spoken about, I mean, not everything in the universe has a polar opposite. Instead, there's like a system in place, right? There's something that the universe does to allow it to be what it is. And so if I really had to change the definition, I would say that balance is a system rooted in subsystems in order for it to evolve or function in the natural world. What am I talking about? Well, one of the systems that you could really see by observing is that the universe and nature balance is rooted in reciprocity. Now, reciprocity, I know these are big words, but reciprocity is the system of giving and receiving something in return. All of life, everything that we know, all of existence is rooted in this, in reciprocity, this act of giving something to get something in return. We can observe this even in our everyday lives, and we also do this in witchcraft. Let me give you an example of reciprocity in nature, because that's the easiest one to envision, okay? There's a flower. Now, a flower is designed to attract bugs and birds, okay? Just to name a few. Now, a bee comes along and it's attracted by this flower. And so it goes to the flower. Now, the reason the flower is attractive to the bee is because the flower, not in the literal sense, but the flower really wants the bee to take, or the insect or bird, to take its pollen. So the bee said, I'll be happy to. Not literal colors, okay? Just keep that in mind, not literal. And the bee's like, sure, because it likes the pollen. And it then takes the pollen, goes to its hive, and all the little bees are happy, okay? Well, this wasn't just the flower giving the bee the pollen. It was also an exchange, something the flower got in return. By the bee taking the pollen, it actually pollinated the flower. And now the flower can produce seeds in order for it to grow next season. That is reciprocity. In the universe, you have atoms. They had give electrons, and sometimes they'll take electrons. Why? So they can produce molecules. That is a system of reciprocity. Now, before we continue on to humans and how this applies to us, I want to stress that the way Mother Nature and the universe does reciprocity is different, or slightly different, than the way humans do reciprocity. See, in Mother Nature and in the universe, when it does reciprocity, it does it for what's best for the ecosystem as a whole. It doesn't do it for the individual animal or the individual atom. Whereas humans, well, we tend to do reciprocity to benefit ourselves and not human species as a whole. Not unless there's something tragic or something we need to do to come together. For instance, like a natural disaster would be a perfect example, or war. So what's the difference, right? Like, what do I mean by the universe and Mother Nature does it differently than us? Well, let me give you an example. Again, back to Mother Nature. An animal loses its life because of another animal. Well, that animal that lost its life, what does it get from that? It gave its life up. What does it get in return? Well, nothing. I mean, the animal doesn't get anything. However, the animal losing its life benefits Mother Nature as a whole. For instance, it's how Mother Nature keeps the population of species under control. That animal that gave its life feeds another animal, takes care of its young. That animal also decomposes. This allows microorganisms and bugs to feed off of it. The microorganisms that feed off of it, well, they help nourish the soil so that plants and trees can grow. The system of reciprocity in nature usually benefits nature's ecosystem as a whole. The same applies in the universe. An atom doesn't just give an electron because, well, it's expecting something in return. It's an atom. It's not really conscious, okay? However, when an atom does do that, well, it creates new things. These new things become other things, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the universe, using reciprocity, benefits as a whole because it will constantly keep evolving. It keeps changing. Now, for humans, let's talk about what we do for reciprocity. Well, a good example of that would be you go to work. You give up your time to your boss. And in return, you expect your boss to pay you for that time. That is reciprocity. Now, I know there are some of you out there probably thinking, look, I know what my boss paid me is not nearly enough as the amount of work and time I give my boss. And I hear you on that. Sure, that may not be balanced, right? However, no one said reciprocity was fair, okay? Or even, or equal, okay? See, reciprocity can be negative, positive, or both. It all depends on the situation and you. In Mother Nature, reciprocity is definitely not fair. That animal that lost its life didn't want his life to be taken away. I guarantee you that. He probably ran and, was hoping that for the best. But unlike animals, we as humans, we have the capabilities of changing our lives and the outcome. If we find something is outside the balanced system that we want in our lives, we can change it, and we can use reciprocity to make that happen. Now, I'm not naive to know that there are circumstances that people have that makes it difficult. But understand, there are moments in humanity's time where we band together, do reciprocity to make all our lives better. So why is this important, right? I mean, the video is titled Balance in Witchcraft. Well, the idea that I'm trying to get you to understand is that though, yes, the philosophical concept of balance, the concept of being interconnected, that's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful philosophy. But it doesn't tell the full picture of what we're really doing. Like the how. How do we get there? In witchcraft, we cast spells. We send energy out in the universe expecting something in return. we can literally use the system of balance in order to make our lives better. And that's something that I wish was talked about more in witchcraft. It's not. So I wanted to put that out there because, again, polar opposites doesn't tell the whole story. It only gives a piece of it. But even that polar opposite does reciprocity in its own way. Anyway, this video can go on for hours and we can literally relate so much stuff to the system of reciprocity. I'm calling it that, okay? And how balance relates to all of that and how we can utilize it. But that's something we're going to do as we go further into our videos, all right? Understand, the idea here is for us to build a foundation so we can be able to communicate with each other. And I'm trying to get us to kind of see things a little differently than what we're probably used to, what we have this idea of, because it's about sharing ideas, it's about growing, and it's about evolving. And I am definitely trying to share as much of what I know and through my experience and how I perceive things. So that way you understand where I'm coming from, right? I mean, what's the point of doing all these videos if you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about? Anyway, y'all, I think that's good for today before our brains explode. I'm sending you all much love, light, and positive energy. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so you can get further videos and watch some more. Hit that like button. Let me know that you actually want to see more videos. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. As always, blessing you.